In July 17, Ukraine Media Center starts its operation. My name is Svetlana Cheparenko, and now we will be talking about the way how we can make another step towards justice when it comes to the crimes committed by Russian Federation with regard to sexual violence during the conflict. The civil organizations will be urging to add Russia to the UN list of shame, and there is a reason we talk about it today. Today is the International Day of Criminal Justice, and joining us in our studio are the representatives of 4 civil organizations, those who work with the survivors of the sexual violence committed by Russian Federation, tortures committed by Russian Federation, and other crimes related to the war. So today we will be talking about this urgent call of the civil organizations to add Russia to the United Nations shame list for the committed sexual violence during the conflict. Joining us online will be Kateryna Levchenko, Government Commissioner for Gender Policy, and Charu Lata Hogg, Founder and Executive Director of All Survivors Project. And joining us in the studio will be Iryna Dovhan, SEMA Ukraine NGO, Oleksii Sivak, Alumni Network NGO, Liudmyla Huseinova, Numo Sisters NGO, and Andrii Kochmuradov, December 29th NGO. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. So, Mr. Andrii, let me start with you. Can you please tell us about the initiative of the civil organizations? How did you come up with this idea of the urge to United Nations? So, and can you please explain the concept of the United Nations shame list? Well, I'll start with the second question. What is the list of shame? Back in 2008, the Security Council of the United Nations recognized CRSV as something that poses threat to peace and security. And back then, the mechanisms started being discussed how to prevent this type of crime. And one of such mechanisms is the annual report by the United Nations Secretary General about the situation with the conflict-related sexual violence, and specifically the addendum to that report, to which those actors are being added in relation of which the systemic violation of this kind is documented. As it's known, there were 12 such reports delivered by the Secretary General of the United Nations, and in those reports, 70 different organizations were mentioned which were which were committing this type of violation. I think the one country was excluded from that list, or other actors, they either merged with other organizations or ceased their existence. So why is this list important? When a country is being added to that list, or any military organizations of that country are being added, the dialogue is being initiated about how to exclude that party from that list, because it entails reputational losses for those who end up on that list. And then a plan is being developed how it can be done, what is the strategy of the United Nations, and United Nations verifies whether the party being accused does anything to be excluded from the list. Now, a little bit about our initiative. It was shaped after the meeting with Pamela Patton in the end of the last year, during which many of the participants were mentioning the shame list, and there was a feeling, there was such a misbalance between expectations and what we have in reality, because it became clear that such human rights international organizations, they are very slow, mired in bureaucracy, and those things that cause no doubt that those crimes, they are verified, they are proven, and they were also proven by the Department of United Nations Human Rights Commissioner, and still Russia doesn't end up on any shame list or is not getting any sanctions imposed specifically for this reason. We know that there are a lot of sanctions imposed on Russian Federation, but you're going to be surprised they are not sanctioned for violation of human rights. They are sanctioned, or like that there are specific citizens of Russian Federation who are being sanctioned, like those who were holding Oleksii Navalny captive. But in general, the state of Russian Federation is not sanctioned for violation of human rights. So our initiative is aiming at drawing attention to this matter. We've set up a coalition which unites organizations that are convinced that Russia is supposed to be ending up on that list, and what to do. And about what to do and what's coming, other speakers may speak. And I'm asking the technical team to have Ms. Kateryna joining us. And we'll find out from her when can we expect to hear the report of the Secretary General and what should the survivors do if the Russian Federation is not added to that list. Can we have Ms. Kateryna put on the screen?
Пані Катерино, вітаємо.
Ms. Kateryna, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. My pleasure hearing and seeing you. Thank you for not only coming up with this important initiative to have Russian Federation added to the shame list, but also for continuing your advocacy work at both national and international level, involving more and more organizations in your campaigns. What can we say in response to your question? Well, first of all, it's really a complicated process to have any country added to such shame list, which is called a special annex to the report of the Secretary General of the United Nations about countries, organizations, or military unions which are being reasonably suspected of systemic sexual violence in relation to both civilians and military. Obviously, there are positive cases after adoption of this resolution 1960 when these or those armed groups were ending up on that list, but Mr. Andrii is absolutely right. Russia was never added to this list. However, last year there was an active campaign or like representation of materials, I would put it like this, because this resolution should be made in a reasoned and weighed manner based on the verified data. And here I would like to draw your attention to two things. The reasonable suspicion. There is information that Russian Federation is military are committing sexual violence against Ukrainian civilians and Ukrainian prisoners of war. Well, it all should be proven and verified for us as a country, as a government, as a society. It's important because we have cooperation with the monitoring mission of the United Nations on human rights, and it's actively working in Ukraine. Now it has access to those people who were affected by Russian aggression. Obviously, it involves a lot of law enforcement work who review and prove such cases, and it's also about the work of different international organizations, including civil organizations, that document cases like this, because not all of the survivors, we know it, we understand it for sure, we were discussing it a lot of times, not all of the survivors report to the law enforcement agencies. That's why the validation of data is very important, and that's the first important condition. Another important condition that we have to pay attention to is the systemic nature. The proofs of the systemic nature of the sexual violence. We clearly understand that it's a systemic crime that is being supported by the government of Russian Federation. And the example we're having since the year 2022, when after the withdrawal from Kiev region, first of all from Bucha, those military units, the Russian military units that were there after coming back to Russian Federation got an honorable title of the guard, which means that the acts of sexual violence that were committed there, they were supported by the top brass of Russian Federation. And it's important for us to demonstrate that sexual violence against the citizens was committed not only with the beginning of the full-scale invasion, but with the very beginning of the war of Russia against Ukraine, starting from the year 2014. And the growth of number, unfortunately, the growth of number of statistics about the people affected by CRSV, well, there is confirmation of that too, but what helps us is the resolution of the European Court for Human Rights that recognized Russia as a party responsible in accordance with the European Convention on Human Rights for violation of human rights committed during the conflict starting from the year 2014. That's a famous case, Ukraine and the Netherlands against Russian Federation, that was related to the downing of MH17 airplane that was flying from Amsterdam to Malaysia. It was downed by the Russian military in above the territory of the Donetsk region of Ukraine. But this case has a lot of legal ramifications because the European Court on Human Rights makes conclusions about the systemic nature of the crimes of Russian military that are being committed in Ukraine, including conflict-related sexual violence. That's why the legal grounds may be different, but with no doubt we won't be able to say whether Russia in 2022 will end up in this shame list. It's a resolution that may objectively be taken by the UN Secretary General, upon the report that will be delivered in the Security Council later this year. And there are two scenarios. Scenario number one, Russia is added to this list. Scenario number two, Russia is not being added to this list. Both of the scenarios, obviously, the first one is what we expect, but both scenarios stimulate us to continue our work because we should continue proving the systemic nature of the crimes of the Russian Federation. We should communicate this information to international community. We need to present real facts in the United Nations Security Council to our international colleagues. We should use all of the UN platforms, including UN General Assembly, UN Commission on the Status of Women, other thematic events and international events. Obviously, our cooperation and openness of the government to cooperation with the United Nations Human Rights Monitoring Mission is an important precondition for the success of our movement. From the history of other countries, we know that sometimes many years were needed for systemic professional work to have any country added to this list that we call the list of shame. That's why the work should continue and the government is ready to support the initiatives of Ukrainian and international civil organizations. Thank you very much for our close cooperation, and let's continue working together. Thank you, Ms. Kateryna. And now let's get back to our studio. We know that within the last half a year, the civil organizations were doing quite an active work as to the advocacy of this initiative. So, Ms. Liudmyla, can you please tell us a little bit more about the way this work was done?
Thank you. And the question is right, both on international and on the national level. We don't make any difference. So which way to accomplish this work, whether it's among the Ukrainian people or on the international level. Not a single meeting or an event. There was around a few dozens of them by this time. We don't stay silent about this. We're not silent about this story. Working on the national level directly with the victims. We have to prove the facts of multitude of the crimes that are related to the sexual violence during conflict, and the fear that exists when interrogating the survivors, so that we understand how one organization, for example, has around 400 cases documented. Another one has 500 of them. So we don't know as of right now if they are overlapping or not, which means we have a lot of work in front of us to accomplish. And this just means that we all have to unite and work together. We conducted a lot of different meetings with the representatives of other countries of the European Union, other countries here in Ukraine. We asked them to support our initiatives, our desire for justice. We worked persistently on including the Russian Federation into the shame list, and also, which is very important, how it should be, how the question of the children in this context should be included. We have already have certain results, like the Russian Federation can no longer act as a peacekeepers, and it's a victory for us. So after this undoubtedly victory, there is also something to work about together with our international partners. So we don't just need support anymore. We want to act together towards a common goal, and there is to be a lot, miles and miles covered in this regard. All of our organizations conducted a lot of different meetings, and a lot of events were organized, but the support that the Ukrainian delegation, while being in New York, not a single person among those people, was not a single person who did not help us to work on this issue. Everyone was talking about justice. Everyone was referring to one of dozens of our human rights organizations, and I'm so grateful to everyone who supported this and who continues to do this today. A lot of events. There was no time to discuss this with other representatives of the organizations, but we are heading directly towards a very powerful event, and if there will be no decision regarding our issue, we will have to discuss and make decisions on what we have missed in our work, where we should be looking our same-minded people, both on the national level and the international level. And returning to our work, we know exactly how many people, what a huge number of people are staying in the captivity in the Russian Federation, and we understand that the military people are the people who do not speak all too openly about problems such as these. So we have to work with those people too, so that they feel safe, they feel supported when they make the decisions to address these issues on the official level. This is main focus of our help when we are looking for justice. Miss Iryna, let's continue our discussion with you, because you represented the voices of those people who are survivors of the Russian Federation's crimes. And as was already mentioned in New York, these things were mentioned. Please, can you talk in detail? Well, first of all, I would like to thank to the men's initiated organizations, because that's where we received the most support, and the most decisions were made within the framework of those organizations, and we were in luck to actually receive this help in this undoubtedly very important direction of our government activity. After I have read the guidelines provided by Mr. Sivak, I was very impressed about how organizations are merging, how new organizations are emerging, and how this work reinforces our common goal. This is very important that this being advocated by the people who survived the sexual related crimes of the Russian Federation during this conflict. And I'm impressed with the power these people have within them to fight this battle, and seeing how all the women in Ukraine are trying and help and are helping on our path. And when women are telling about the traumas that they survived, this is very hard. This is every one of them, when they are talking about this shame list, they mention that it's crucially important for them for the Russian Federation to be included in this list. We addressed so many organizations all around the world asking for support with regards to this letter. It was immense systemic work that's been that's taken place. Like, for example, in Japan and in Strasbourg, we had our voice heard. We see that we were heard during these events, and during this specific 2 visits, we worked closely with the members of the Italian Parliament. Those were the women mostly. They promised that they would be helping us unconditionally on this path. Uh, I would like to also mention the boat of peace. This is a event that we had in Tokyo, and includes more than 1,700 members. And this audience comes from Asian countries of Korea, Japan, and China. However, I must say that it's quite a wide audience. This is very important to relay our message to these people about how our people are suffering. And I think we have managed to actually relay the necessity to act, actually, when it's coming to the things that Ukraine is surviving on the everyday basis. I'm grateful to my colleagues again, and I would like to pass the microphone to Oleksii. Oleksii, can you please tell us how you involved new partners, how you engaged new partners to this initiative? Well, as my colleagues have already mentioned, this is our common initiative. We talked a lot about it. We discussed it a lot, and then we just concluded that we need to act. We need to act so that our voices are heard, and the people who were involved directly in these unfortunate events, and who know better than anyone else what the injustice is, what this discrimination means. I can say that it involves different units of the United Nations organizations that cover different cases, different forms of this violence. On the other hand, some of the members of these organizations do not understand how exactly this classification is working, because it is kind of does not make any sense when the victims or survivors have to classify the violence that they underwent, and so that's one of the focus of our appeals. Thanks to the actions of our organization, our adjacent related organizations. Our network is working for more than a year, and our project, it was discussed a lot of times with. It was connected with emotional layer, a layer of these talks that we organized. It was just our call as human beings, not as legal entities. And I think it's exactly this time when we were actually heard, when we did that, and that's when we understood that this is how you actually provide validity, how you validate these appeals. It's our letter. You can see it on the screen. We have written it together in cooperation with other organizations within this topic. And this is just a beginning. Mr. Oleksii, what is the consequences for the Russian Federation if they are to be included into this shame list? Well, as Mr. Andrii have said, we already have concrete results. The European Human Rights Court have concluded that the Russian Federation cannot act as a peacekeeper. So basically, what we have is that international legal mechanisms conclude themselves that there is it's already high time for reforms, practical changes. Please, I would like to ask if the technical team could invite
Ms. Charu, Lata, Hogg, and Ms. Charu, can you please tell us whether the persons who commit sexual-related conflict violence, do they assist to having Russia added to this shame list? I mean, what these civil organizations require? Thank you.
Can you hear me well?
Yeah,
Can you hear me
we
well?
hear you.
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, great. So there are two issues here, and all these issues have been discussed in the session today. But before I start talking about, our position in relation to the listing of the Russian Federation, I want to extend my deepest gratitude towards the Alumni Network, December 29, Numo Sister, SEMA, the Interagency Working Group, individually Dr. Kateryna Levchenko, for the leadership that has been demonstrated and for opening up, the future and the prospect of collaboration with All Survivors Project. Our work is really about informing the international and national community about your rights and working with you. So thank you for the honor of allowing us to work with you and for inviting me here today. So firstly, the legal position. A Security Council Resolution 1960 has mandated that the UN Secretary General establish what is called a monitoring, analysis and reporting arrangement. It's called MARA. So that arrangement allows for the documentation of information on the ground by the UN. And the purpose of MARA is to ensure that there is systematic gathering of timely, accurate, reliable, and objective information on conflict-related sexual violence. So the MARA draws on information gathered from a variety of sources. These include local government authorities and institutions, health and psychosocial service providers, the civilian police and military peacekeeping presences, and the UN country team actors. So it is a very comprehensive mechanism. And information that MARA gathers is used to promote appropriate and timely action to prevent and respond to conflict-related sexual violence. Now, in relation to this is the annual report of the Secretary General on Sexual Violence, which relies on information gathered through MARA. And this is really an important point to note, that while all of us here are agreed that there should be greater documentation, there should be greater coordination between different documenters, the fact is that the system that the UN relies on for their annual reports exists. This system exists, and this system has gathered information which is reliable and UN verified in order to advocate for the inclusion of parties responsible in the annual report, in the annex of the annual report, as parties credibly responsible for committing acts of sexual violence. This serves many purposes. The first is it creates a public historical record for a crime that has been omitted from often official accounts of war and peace. So, for example, in the context of the documentation that will happen in the Russian Federation, they will not take account for these violations. The Russian Federation is not going to document these acts. So this is a historical record that is collected, and it is based on reliable information. Now, this also has a legal implication. It creates an obligation on the part of the parties who are listed to develop specific time-bound commitments and action plans to address violations. So as Dr. Levchenko pointed out, that whether the listing happens or does not happen, there is work to be done on both sides. So if we are lucky enough and fortunate enough that our very legally sound demand to the UN that the parties of the Russian Federation be listed in the annex of the Secretary General's report, it will put pressure for the Russian Federation to develop time-bound action plans. And this development of action plans will then put pressure on them to take actions which are legally required in order to both prevent acts of violation, secondly, take actions in relation to accountability for individuals who are responsible for these actions, and it will be a commitment on the part of the state. So we have to be all prepared for that situation, that if and when the listing happens, we have to apply pressure on the UN to demand this accountability of the Russian Federation. Now, how does it link to international accountability? It links to international accountability because first and foremost, it is a recognition of these acts which reinforces actions that are happening at the level of the International Criminal Court and reinforces actions that, as Dr. Levchenko mentioned, have already taken place on the level of the European Court for Human Rights. So it is a reinforcement. It is another way in which pressure is applied. It is a public acknowledgement. The second issue relates to survivor-centeredness. Now, all national and international justice institutions pledge that they are survivor-centered. So if they are truly survivor-centered, there will be an acknowledgement of this very core demand by survivors to have this public acknowledgement. The third issue is related to memorialization. So it is very important that this historical record becomes a memory, a way in which that these crimes have been committed, have been recorded in the public domain. And this also becomes a way in which pressure is applied on the state, in this case the Russian Federation, to comply and take steps. I wonder if I've answered your question, and I wonder if you're able to hear me. Thank you.
Дякую вам, пані Чару, за
Thank you very much, Ms. Charu, for your support and for joining our today's conversation. And also, I would like to thank all of the panelists. Thank you for your perseverance. Thank you for your strength. And we all expect this year's report of the Secretary General will list those issues that you mentioned. Let me remind you that we were discussing the urge of the civil organizations to have Russia added to the list of shame over wartime sexual violence, and Ukraine Media Center team is putting together the schedule for further events. Thank you for staying tuned. Glory to Ukraine.